I'm going to show you some issues about urban freight data and knowledge. And I will take the opportunity to present you what we've been doing in CityLab, not specifically part of the 7 implementations that were presented yesterday, but a baseline of an observatory of urban freight data that we also set up during CityLab. And there's a brochure about that observatory. The observatory is actually a big technical report. You have a lot of things in it, but there's also a summary of it in a brochure that you can find downstairs. So please look, take away the brochure with you. And I will present to you what's in the observatory. But first, I really want to make a point about the need that we all have in terms of urban freight data. And to do that, I will present you one example, one city. And guess which city this is. This is the best city in terms of urban freight data in the world. That's Bordeaux in France. So you didn't know that, but it's the only city in the world, and when I'm saying city, I'm talking about the metropolitan area of Bordeaux, so quite bigger than, of course, the city of Bordeaux. But when I'm saying it's the best, it's because they have made 2 very big, comprehensive urban freight data collection over the past 20 years. So one 20 years ago, one recently. So this is an amazing step forward because we can compare 2 different times in the history, the recent history of urban freight operations in one city. And the misery of urban freight data is that this is the only city in the world that has a history of urban freight surveys. That means all the other cities in the world have, some of them have good data, but it's for once, they did it once, or they do very small scale urban freight data collection. Only Bordeaux has a comprehensive, big survey twice in the history of its urban freight operations in the recent past, 20 years ago. Same methodology for the survey. And I want to thank my colleagues at Laboratory of Transport Economics in Lyon because they were the initiators and the managers of the survey. However, flaws with the survey, it's already past 5 years ago. The second survey was done in 2013. So it's already 5 years. So we have data from 5 years ago. We don't even have recent data. The first problem. The second big problem with that survey, again, it's a very comprehensive survey. They looked at all the different economic sectors and urban freight related to different urban supply chains in Bordeaux. But they didn't look at e-commerce deliveries. B2C supply chains are not covered by survey. So the best survey in the world is not even covering B2C. So you see how desperate we are for better urban freight data collection or new ways of doing data collection now with the new technologies. But we need to make progress, and we really need to make that progress. So just a few other words about Bordeaux, because I said it's a good survey, so I want to show you a few results of that survey. And again, we thank our colleagues at LET in Lyon for doing that effort, and the city of Bordeaux, of course, that was involved in the financing of that survey. Very interesting results, lots of results. I'm just going to show you just a very few of them. There's interesting result in terms of a stable delivery intensity in Bordeaux for the B2B urban supply chains. What do I call delivery intensity? It's a ratio of the number of deliveries per week, per job, or per inhabitant. You can take any kind of ratio. It's stable. So B2B deliveries in terms of a ratio per job or per number of inhabitants has been stable over the past 20 years. Very interesting. But of course, the number of jobs and the Bordeaux area in general, the economy has grown. So the total number of B2B deliveries has grown by 12%. Right, over the 20 years. So a stable intensity of delivery, but because there are more jobs and more activity, there are more deliveries. So it's about plus 12%. If you add B2C and we did it using other types of surveys. If you add B2C activities, you have a total increase of the number of deliveries in Bordeaux by 50%. Number of deliveries being somewhat equivalent to number of freight trips. Freight trips have increased by 50% in Bordeaux over the last 20 years. Most of the increase, B2C deliveries. So these are things that we know, of course, from small surveys, because we know B2C has increased a lot. But Bordeaux is the only city in the world that can prove it by very specific numbers through a comprehensive data collection. So that was my introductory story about Bordeaux. What did we do in the observatory that I mentioned to you about, and we have that in that brochure, is something else. Because we don't have these urban freight data for many cities, we had to go around the issue of actual very specific urban freight data. For CityLab, we decided another strategy. We decided to look at new trends in the urban economies. What's happening? What are the new things, the new behaviors from the consumers, from the stores? What's new in terms of mobility in general? And what is the potential impact on urban freight for today and the future? So we did an observatory of trends and developments in the urban economy that are impacting and will impact urban freight, right? So that's another way of looking at the issue of knowledge and data. So that's what we did. Of course, we didn't look at all the different trends. For example, we didn't look at the new technological developments in terms of a very specific look at the technology. We did look at that, but we specifically made a focus on 4 areas, and I will very briefly present these 4 areas to you just to give you an idea of what's in the observatory and what's in the report I mentioned. So we looked at 4 trends today. Of course, e-commerce, and we did a specific focus on instant deliveries. I will very briefly mention to you what I mean by these instant deliveries, the very new service that provides you with deliveries within 2 hours in urban areas. We looked at logistics sprawl and the new developments of warehouses in metropolitan areas. So that's the second thing we looked at. We looked at the circular economy, projects and ideas and concepts, and we looked at service trips. So we looked at 4 different new developments in the urban economy, and we looked at the potential impacts on the urban freight mobility, right? So that's what is in the observatory that we did for CityLab. E-commerce, lots of data in our report about e-commerce in Europe, e-commerce in specific countries, e-commerce in specific cities, and e-commerce in actually the rest of the world too. Just here, briefly, it's actually one of the main drivers for city logistics innovations. That's where it happened. A lot of these, even including technological innovations, because of e-commerce. But you know that, and we have examples in the report. What I also wanted to point to you today is that including in these innovations is a new niche market for urban real estate in terms of logistics. New urban warehouses. This is a very small niche, but it's growing, and it's because of e-commerce needs for more and more immediate deliveries, same-day deliveries, 2-hour deliveries, 30-minute deliveries. These are new services. For that, you need new types of urban facilities, micro-hubs, all the way to urban warehouses. So that's a new real estate activity for logistics because of e-commerce. So that's what we look at in the report, the impact of e-commerce demand, e-commerce supplies, e-retailers on urban freight and urban freight real estate. Just one focus we did on these new e-commerce services is what I call instant deliveries. And I think this observatory is probably one of the few reports, areas where you can actually find data on instant deliveries, which are deliveries made before 2 hours after order, and specifically made using smartphone apps. So we have a lot of data, all we could collect from different European countries about these new services of instant deliveries. Our second focus is logistics sprawl, which is the way warehouses over the past 10 years have been decentralizing in the suburban and far suburban areas, generating a lot of truck kilometers to deliver back into the cities. So logistics sprawl, we have been in the observatory, in the report, we have been collecting a lot of this data about the way warehouses locate in suburban areas. This is the example of Los Angeles. We have examples from Europe, obviously, and we also have examples from the rest of the world. We actually have 25 case studies. So that's in the report. We have a lot of data on the way warehouses have been located into our metropolitan areas. So obviously what you can see from the maps is that there are many, many more warehouses today than 20 years ago in all our cities, actually, especially the large cities in Europe, North America, and the rest of the world. Many, many more warehouses. And the second trend is that these warehouses locate much further away in the suburban areas than before. So two trends, more warehouses, and they locate further away. So actually it takes more vehicle kilometers to come back to the stores and the people's homes to deliver. So more vehicle kilometers. So that's all we have. We have a lot of indicators of this impact on urban freight mobility because warehouses are further away. Our third focus, the third trend we've been looking at is what we call circular economy. This is more recent. There's very few data, but there's generating new urban supply chains. Circular economy means a lot of new urban supply chains for the recycling of goods. Less transport for new products, more transport maybe for these new urban supply chains to accommodate recycling and all these new urban, intra-urban supply chains for the circular economy. So that's more into the perspective, into the future, but we collected what we could in terms of data, and we did some sort of analysis on the potential impact for the future in terms of these new urban supply chains. You probably will have more transport because of the needs for circular economy. And overall, it will be okay. Maybe more transport, but overall, less CO2 impact because of the recycling of these products. And our final focus was on service trips. Service trips between passenger mobility and freight mobility. There's service trips. Many of them are using commercial vehicles. They don't have the objective of transporting goods, but as a consequence of a professional mobility need, there's a transport of goods or tools or many other things. But there's a huge part of the urban mobility that is related to these trips that are part of the commercial traffic induced by service-oriented activities, maintenance, and all the different works you can do in an apartment building or in an office building or in a home. You need these commercial vehicles. They are growing in the urban mobility. And we lack data, again, for these, but there's a good German study that we looked at very carefully in the report, and it's about 12% of all traffic in German cities, service trips, and when I'm saying all traffic, I'm including passenger mobility, private cars, but it's about 1/3 of all commercial traffic. So it's a big part of the urban mobility of commercial vehicles in general. So we're trying to make links between freight, service, passenger, in terms of basic data. So that's all I wanted to show you this morning, very briefly. What's in our observatory? Again, my main message is that we need more urban freight data. We need all of us to collect more data. We need to find innovative ways to do so. What I'm also providing some resource, the websites and other places where you can find some sort of urban freight data existing today, such as the Bordeaux survey I mentioned. My final word is to say that this CityLab observatory will continue even after CityLab is finished, which is very soon, but we will make it a permanent observatory, and we will try to include all the indicators, and I know Novalog has also been working on these urban freight data and indicators. So we will try to enlarge the observatory, looking at additional trends, not only the 4 trends I mentioned, and actually also collecting different urban freight data for the different European cities that are actually making this effort of collecting more data. So thank you.